Hello, good morning. I'm going to talk about the social cognitive theory. So, um, uh, so what we are going to talk about are these topics, including the definition, historical background, concept studies, the strengths of the SAT, application, limitation, and criticism, and finally the references. So SAT is a theory that explains how people learn by observing others, their interaction with their environment, and through the outcomes of these experiences. Now, its core claim, its main construct is that behavior can be learned by observation. And as a background, this was actually um, proposed as SLT by a Canadian psychologist who is Albert Bandura, whom we've talked about a lot lately. And later on, this was called SAT as a response to the theory of behaviorism from actually Freud, and that states that all learning is through conditioning, where environmental stimuli shapes how we act and respond. So this is in order to propose another theory from what was existing at that time. So he proposed SLT because he believes that human behavior can actually be learned, and the key aspects of how people learn are based on observation, imitation, and later on modeling. So SAT modeling is when observation is a key part of SAT. Now, this is because we are influenced by others. And later on, we sustain this action by maintaining focus on learning while being selective to the right cues. So retention may be done through practice later on, and then production phase keeps the learning smooth through more and more practice and feedback. Motivation and reinforcement may be done through persistence, and a reward system can also play a vital role. So, what are the assumptions of these concepts? So, observing someone else's success or failure can lead to behavior modification, even if one did not personally experience it. So, we learn from others, and it does not necessarily mean that we have to experience the whole thing, but by observing, it can be an effective way of learning. So, that's why it can also be a good help tool. So, internal process may or may not lead to behavior, as some may be able to learn without applying what they have learned. So, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily uh, it's not necessary that when we learn, we apply things. So, in that sense, what we learn, we sometimes do not apply. And then learning may also be based on goal because sometimes we have this goal in mind, so we take the cues that we want and lead into the goal from those cues. So behavior will eventually become self-regulated. We polish and polish what we've learned, and later on, we will be able to regulate our own learning. And observational learning, there are two ways of learning. We can learn from direct experience and observe from others. And there are four processes that influence observational learning. One is we need to have that full attention or attention, and then retention of what we've learned, motor reproduction, and reinforcement and motivation, which can be through, like what I previously said, reward system. So there's what you call triadic reciprocal determinism. So this is also called your triadic reciprocal causation. So this behavior is influenced by three factors: the personal factors, the environment factors, or we call it sometimes external factors, and then the behavior itself. For the personal factors, an example of this is thoughts or thinking, and it includes our belief, our biology as well. And then environmental factors would be our surrounding, other people that actually influences the way we think and we can use for learning. Also, behavior itself is aggression, or what we call the next would be self-efficacy. So belief about about one's ability are important in order for us to learn these things. And this is what we call as self-efficacy. There are four sources of self-efficacy that, and we have been discussing this early, and we feel that this is actually something that's common in all the methods like SAT that we've discussed. So in self-efficacy, there must be a sort of mastery from personal and direct experiences. The most common and effective source of self-efficacy is, of course, this one, the mastery. And we have the degrees of physiological arousal. The excitement raises efficacy. Seeing anxious excitement actually helps us because it actually um, gives a better efficacy. Well, if we are anxious and we are afraid all the time, it actually lowers our self-efficacy. And vicarious experiences, like people tend to model themselves with others, like for example, our teachers. So that actually affects our self-efficacy as well. Social persuasion leads to momentary increase in our eagerness to learn. And if we receive praise from others as well, that's also a good fuel for our self-efficacy. So, as discussed in the previous slide, this is what we call the reciprocal determinism, in which the behavior is, including our actions and directions, are actually part of the triadic reciprocal determination. Environment is also one that actually covers external spaces, laws, and other things similar. And then we have your person, the internal competencies, cognitive, emotional, and physical aspect of the person in order to learn. So, what are the studies that supports SATs? Number one is the Bubudal. Bubudal study is actually one of the studies that's conducted in the 1961 and 1963. I could say that it's one of the pioneers, in which if the children are actually placed in a room and an adult is actually hammering a doll, a Bubudal, chances are the children would actually do it when they are alone. And it also shows that some of the males, I mean, generally males have twice the aggression compared to females, although there are actually a lot of controversies and arguments on that aspect because it could be nurture or nurture. So that's the Bubudal that actually supports the SAT theory. And then we have the TRD, or the Dunedin study, in which gene itself does not actually contribute to the behavior itself. It could be a multilateral factor. So multilateral factor, for example, you actually learn it from obesity. For example, you learn it uh, if you don't have the, let's say, the genes that promotes obesity, but you are placed in a family that actually don't have the right eating habits. Therefore, you are actually expected to, or more or less, you will be expected to have obesity too. So it doesn't really matter if you have the genes or not. The environment also plays a role, and the environment is just only one thing. It's actually a multilateral factor. That's what we call it in genetics. And the self-efficacy and GPA. GPA is actually correlated to academic efficacy in one of the ASEAN studies because our determination may actually contribute to our success as well. So, what are the strengths of SAT? Accounting multifactorial sources, social interactions, and environmental factors, which are actually vital, no? As what we show in the previous slide, that they actually count in order for a person to learn. So this is a good thing, other than focusing only on behavioral, that makes SCT closer to the real world and situation, as well as being flexible. So it's a good model for learning. No, applications to violence and the media. So, for example, if there are too much violence in the media, there are some point that you don't need the child to take a look at it because they might be able to imbibe it. And then teaching and learning is actually a basic example. What we teach the kids, they actually learn. And even in professional teaching, we teach methods, even though they haven't encountered that earlier and they did not undergo trial and error method. They're able to learn it because we impart it to them, and we enforce it by grades and encouragement, as well as maybe um, quizzes and other things. So, influencing positive behavior or the Sabido methodology. So this is also another thing. No, we influence the good behavior by introducing good behavior as well to others. So in my case, I personally would like to use SET by creating brochures and promoting education to the PDLs, or the person deprived of liberty, um, on their blood pressure management, so that I can actually make a program called pharmacist-led hypertension management. So this SAT can be a good component, although I'm planning to use Proceed Proceed, but this can also be a good component because we are not limited to one, right? So this is could be a good component for the program that I have in mind for my dissertation. And then limitation and criticism, biological factors like genetics may be underestimated as a contributing factors in your SAT, because we always focus on um what can be imitated outside. But like what I've said, genetics is a multifactorial aspect. So in the Boo Boo doll experiment, like what I've said, it could be nature or nurture in the form of the behavior of the males, or it could be very biased to the males also. So is aggressive behavior 100% learned? So maybe it can be maybe emotional situation can also be taken into consideration in that case. So these are my references, and I would like to thank you for listening. And I'm sorry because I wasn't able to catch with the 4 a.m. Um, bus. So I was from another trip. Thank you very much.